Thank you for coming. First of all, I would like to introduce our minister, Reverend David Herman.
Thank you, Sandy. Yeah, this is one of those mics you have to eat when you're speaking. I'm used to those. So, it is a privilege to be here. And if I'm doing my math right, we're looking at about 180 years of history. So, this area, Finger Lakes area, is an old area in the state. And there is much more history than we're usually aware of, but it's nice to be able to be part of this. So, on behalf of the congregation of Sodus United Third Methodist Church, I bid you good afternoon and welcome to this celebration of the life of Sodus United Third. On behalf of this congregation, its past, present, and future generations, it is my privilege and pleasure to pray God's blessings on each of us gathered here, and on those who are not present today, who have made this possible, and on all our families and all their generations and locations. May we each and all of us experience, recognize, and share God's blessings of peace and grace this day and every day. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend. Patty? Is she here?
Come on up. I'll get your intro right, Hannah. Welcome. I'm Patty Paprocki. I'm the Vice President of the Sodus Historical Society, and this is Hannah Ward. She's here representing Assemblyman Manktalo, and she's the Community Relations Director for the Assemblyman. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah, got it right. All right. And she's brought us something.
Happy to give it to you.
Yeah. So this is a citation from the New York State Assembly. Don't go away, Hannah, because you're part of this. You probably wrote it. In recognition of the Pomeroy marker dedication honoring the Methodist tradition that began in this region over 2 centuries ago, this church has long served as a steadfast beacon of faith and community. From its early gatherings to the construction of its sanctuary, the church has grown alongside its congregation, and it's signed on May 12th of this year by Brian Manktalo. Thank you, Hannah. Set that here.
Is there anything else I can do for you?
I don't think so. Okay, very good. Who's next, Sandy? I think that's our only government official here. Is that correct? All right. So we'll hand this back to Sandy.
Well, there is one from the village of Sodus.
Oh, you!
I want to give you a brief introduction how this all came about, so bear with me. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Thank you. In the winter of 2021, a small group of church members formed a committee to complete an application for a grant that would help us to finance 2 major projects in the church. Thank you. The replacement of the boiler and the lift, both of which had run their course. I learned about the grant opportunity through our Wayne County Historians Organization when we received an email from Megan Clem, Preservation Planner at the Landmark Society of Western New York. According to her email, and I quote, there were grant opportunities that would be funded through a $750,000 grant awarded to the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historical Preservation from the National Park Service's Paul Brune Rural Revitalization Grants Program and the Genesee Valley Rural Revitalization Grant Program. The grant was to be administered by the Landmark Society of Western New York and by the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historical Preservation. The grants were for the historic restoration and rehabilitation projects throughout rural communities in the Finger Lakes and Western New York regions. The GVRR program offered $5,000 to $50,000 reimbursable unmatched subgrants for eligible historic buildings to preserve historic places that have shaped rural communities, their social fabric, and economy. After a very long process, we were disappointed when we were not awarded the grant in round one, but we decided to reapply the next year in March of 2022. This time, after waiting several months for some news, we learned that we were one of the 15 applicants who were awarded $50,000 for our projects. During the second round, we learned that we had to be on the New York Historic Register in order to be eligible and to receive the grant money. In the grant process, we hired Gina DeBella, an independent historic preservation and communications consultant and writer, to research the church. Our first application was turned down. Francis Stern and Kathy Howe at the New York State Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation Department took additional local history from us about the church's involvement in the abolition and suffrage movements, along with other activities in which our church was involved in the local community. After a few more months of waiting, we finally received word that our church was added to the National Historic Register. All of our time and effort finally paid off, and we received our check for the grant just a few weeks ago. Once we received word that we were on the register, I applied for the marker at the William G. Pomeroy Foundation through our Town of Sodus Historical Society. Today, we dedicate the marker that represents our long-standing influence in this community. Okay, here's why we got on the historic register. This is our history. And actually, I've cut this down, so. When the first settlers came to our area, it was a wilderness of dense hemlock forests and wild animals roamed the area. According to Walter Green in his books, Great Sodus Bay, the first white man's boat to navigate Lake Ontario was launched in Sodus Bay in 1789. A few years later, in 1806, Elder Jerem was probably the first Methodist minister in the area, which became the town of Sodus. Samuel Warren and his family settled in what is now South Sodus in 1808. His son, Elijah, who was college educated and ordained to preach, held the first Methodist meetings in that area. He joined the annual conference and was appointed to this circuit. He traveled around the township in a 4-week course. Remember, this is in the wilderness with supposedly panthers and wolves and all sorts of wild animals roaming the area. In the early days, prayer and class meetings were held in private homes beginning in 1807 or 1808. The first class was formed in South Sodus in 1824. Quarterly meetings were mostly held in barns. The first one was held at the Baptist Meeting House on September 27, 1828. For several years, the quarterly meetings were held at the Baptist Meeting House in Sodus Center and at the Episcopal and the Presbyterian houses, or churches, on the ridge in what is now the village of Sodus. Methodist meetings were also recorded on Morris Hill in the late 1820s and continued for several years. In 1832, a resolution was passed to build in South Sodus. The meeting house was built in 1834-35 and dedicated on July 4th, 1836. In 1832, the quarterly conference resolved to establish Sunday schools and Bible classes. Other churches in town were also establishing these at the same time. When families settled in the northwest part of town, Methodism spread to that area. Reverend Joseph Gates, who was born in England, settled in Centenary in 1830. He served as a minister for 12 to 14 years before coming to America. The Centenary Church began when he opened the first meeting and preached the first sermon. In Lewis Clark's book, he suggested that this class closely resemble those formed by John Wesley in England. And some of the members of the Centenary Church, including Mr. Ryde, had attended meetings in England where John Wesley preached. As a result, this group followed the early form of English Methodism. Finally, members of the Methodist denomination had the foresight to build on the ridge, which would become one of the main routes of travel. The Third Methodist Episcopal Church of Sodus held a meeting to organize a society and to elect trustees on June 26, 1838. Membership was created out of a union of the classes of the Sentels Mills and Johnson Corners. Trustees included Edward W. Sentel, Milton N. Barclay, John Warner, Michael Tinkapaw, and Stephen White. Mr. Barclay served as the clerk of the board, but because of an error in filing, a second organization was effected. A new certificate was filed on December 3, 1849. At the annual meeting on June 8, 1839, chaired by Riley Belden Avenue over here, subscriptions for a church building were taken. They raised $2,195. E.W. Sentel, M.N. Barclay, William Nichols, Riley Belden, Stephen White, Lyman Dunning, John Warner, Byram Green, Claremont Hewson, Michael Tinkapaw, Charles Field, Levi Gaylord, Enoch Turner, Thomas Gardner, Peter Procius, F. Kingsley, Henry McAlpine, Warren Hopkins, David Poucher, Jacob Filkins, Phineas Knapp, Peter Knapp, Noble Granger, Orrin Gaylord, M.L. Landon, and John M. Granger were among the subscribers. And I listed all of them because those are some of the names that we all know, and they're important to know who all began this. They broke land for the first building on the present site of the church in September 3rd, 1841. The land purchase for the church building was recorded in an indenture made between James K. Richardson of Waterloo, Seneca County, and trustees of the Third Society of the Methodist Church for the sum of $300. By the late fall of 1841, only the basement had been completed, but the first service was held there on Christmas Eve. The stone church, mostly built of cobblestone, was not completed and dedicated until 1846. And if you look on the back of your program, you'll see a picture of the stone church. That's what was here first. And then the purchase of the land for the parsonage next door was built. This was built in 1846 with a wood frame and cobblestone foundation. It was purchased on September 23, 1845, and recorded in an indenture for the sum of $400 made between Mary Alexander and the trustees of the Third Society of the Methodist Episcopal Church. And we have most of these papers, the original papers, because of the foresight of many of our people that came before that saved this information for us. In July 1850, a church bell was purchased from Meneely's Foundry in Troy, New York. This foundry was in Bob Meneely's family. As several of us know, Bob and Donna Meneely were active members in our church for many years before they passed. Former Wayne County Clerk, Colonel A.B. Williams, gave a generous subscription for the bell, along with other village residents, including those who were not even Methodists, because they wanted to have the sound of a church-going bell. Joseph C. Young, Dick Ransley's great-grandfather, went to Lyons to pick up the bell with the assistance of Charles Field. The bell was loaded onto Mr. Young's wagon, and Mr. Field took the clapper home in his buggy. The bell had been loaded at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Mr. Young did not get back to Sodus until 11 or 12 o'clock that night. Shortly after it was installed, Charles J. Allen was employed to ring it through 3 times a day, at 6 a.m., at noon, and at 9 p.m. This bell lasted for many years until it was blown over in a heavy windstorm after the brick building was constructed.
So I will continue on with the story of the bell. A new bell was purchased in Troy by Albert Dodd, who organized the Bell Festival and the Bell Fund. The bell was dedicated at the Bell Festival on October 18th, 1893. Gamaliel Case, great-grandfather of Ed, Jim, John, and Beth Hopkins, was given the privilege to be the first to ring the new bell because he bid $5 in a raffle to do so. The bids began at 50 cents. The inscription on the bell reads, "Let him that heareth say, come." It is a silver tone bell in the key of G flat. It weighs 1,849 pounds. The present brick building was designed in the Romanesque Revival style by well-known Rochester architectural firm of Fay and Dryer. It was built in 1888 and dedicated on January 25th, 1889, replacing the stone church. Unfortunately, 2 weeks before the dedication, a windstorm blew down the south gable. Another windstorm on January 13th, 1891, destroyed the steeple, the south window, and the south end of the church. Another architect was hired to design a new tower which was wider and not as high. This tower was built by Sodus residents Edward Pullman and Wallace Teeter, who happens to be Sandy Mangelo's great-grandfather. In the 20th century, more changes took place. The Ladies' Social Union and the Ladies' Aid Society were both organized in 1910. Mrs. B.J. Case served as the president of the Ladies' Aid Society and was instrumental in raising $1,250. This sum was matched by the Andrew Carnegie Foundation, so the Moeller pipe organ was purchased for $2,675 and installed on August 1st, 1910. The organ was later rebuilt in 1950 at the cost of $8,000. On December 5th, 1920, there was a reopening service after extensive renovation of the church dining room. The church members continued to make improvements, and in 1935, the new hardwood was laid in the sanctuary. In 1939, the church was renamed the Third Methodist Church, and the word Episcopal was dropped. This name was probably mandated by the Methodist denomination. In January 1950, fundraising began again to build arches in the chancel and two-tone chambers for the organ. These were completed and the organ was reinstalled by Easter 1950. A choir room and a classroom were also included in the plans. On March 30th, 1952, a dedication was held for the new chancel and rebuilt organ. On March 26, 1961, the church choir of 43 members wore the new maroon choir robes with the white collars that several of us remember. Mrs. Lucille Curtis was choir director at that time, and later Mrs. Jean Baker served in this position for many years. On October 13, 1963, a consecration service was held for the new church school facilities. The committee in charge of this project included Marcus Buckman, Willard Cole, Reverend Milton Jefferson, Donald Pittman, and Salem Town. The project cost $120,000. At that time, the membership had grown from 653 people to 828. In 1968, the church name was changed again to the United Third Methodist Church of Sodus when the Methodist denomination and the United Brethren joined together. On December 7th, 1969, the dedication of the church school facilities took place. In 1987, there was a complete kitchen renovation. The lounge was also completely redecorated thanks to the generosity of Dr. David Hungerford and Mrs. F.S. Hungerford. Finally, in this last year, a new boiler and a new lift have been installed, partially paid for by the National Park Service's Paul Brune Rural Revitalization Program and the Genesee Valley Rural Revitalization Grant of $50,000. This was made possible through the Landmark Society of Western New York and the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. The church grant committee included Sandra Hamilton, myself, Gloria Mayu, Sandra Hall, William Hans, Pastor Bobby Valentine, Pastor Jules Foos, and David Foos. Over the years, our church has gone through many changes thanks to the efforts of the dedicated church members. The progress is amazing when one considers the Sodus Methodist Episcopal Church began with 5 or 6 members in a meeting held in a vacant store in the early days of our village. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sandy Hopkins, Village and Town Historian. I'm going to give you a little information about the Pomeroy Foundation. It was invented by the William G. Pomeroy Foundation. It is a private grant-making organization based in Syracuse, New York, that helps communities celebrate and preserve their history through 6 different marker signage programs that they offer. Since 2006, they have been helping communities celebrate their local history with premium cast aluminum markers. Starting with just 32 markers in Onondaga County, New York, they have now funded over 2,600 markers across 49 states. Here in Sodus, we are grateful to the foundation that we have been awarded multiple markers the last year. We appreciate the assistance we received from Cindy Kuhn in the application process. This marker identifies the church as one of the more than 93,000 properties that are listed on the National Historical Register. Many properties do not have a plaque that identifies the designation because the marker is not included in the process. Unfortunately, the Pomeroy Foundation has addressed this need by providing grants for markers for these historical places. And again, we thank William G. Pomeroy Foundation for their generosity. Thank you.
You're next.
Just a few closing remarks. Thanks for all the history lesson though, you guys. That was great. A lot of familiar names. We appreciate the generosity of the William G. Pomeroy Foundation, who have provided a National Historic Register marker. We hope the marker will draw attention to this historic building that has been religious and social center of our community for many years. The members of the United Third Methodist Church of Sodus and the Town of Sodus Historical Society, thanks all of you for attending this special dedication today. And we have more coming up. The future dates of our next marker dedications, which are 3 more Patriot markers, are the Sodus Rural Cemetery Patriot marker will be dedicated on Sunday, May 18th at 2 p.m. The Bushnell Cemetery Patriot marker will be dedicated on Monday, June 9th at 2 p.m. And the South Sodus Cemetery Patriot marker on Monday, June 16th at 2 p.m. And I think we've said before that the Brick Church has 2 markers also, one historic and one a Patriot marker, and they're going to do it as part of their 200-year celebration, July of next year, and date to be determined still, right? Yeah. So stay tuned for that as well. Thank you for coming. You got more?
Yeah.
Okay. She wants the final word.
As usual. Is this on?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, it is on.
Just hold it.
Again, we have to thank the people that came before us and kept track of everything so carefully because, like I said, we've got original papers for this church. We actually have a booklet that includes the first meeting written in 1838, in June of 1838. It was lost for about 100 years, And then according to, I believe, our record in maybe 1937, that little book was found down the street here in one of those evaporators that William Foley owned. It. His son, Bill Foley, found it and fortunately got back to us. And over the years, I have to thank Dick Ransley for all of the papers he kept, and he kept them very carefully. He was at the beginning of this. He knew that we were trying to do something with this. So I just am so eternally grateful to him for keeping all of those. And before that, Martha White wrote up quite a history about our church. And before that, Lewis Clark wrote his book, The Churches of Sodus. And so people were very good about keeping our history for us. Those of us that are in the society and that have worked on the grant, we need a picture. We need several pictures now in front of the marker, maybe in front of the church too. We thank you all for coming. Please come to our other dedications that are coming up.